Serious, what terrifying confession has someone told you while intoxicated? I was at a bar one night in an affluent town. An old guy next to me started talking about his sailing days. He had a 60-foot sailboat and used to sail all over North and South America. His story was from the mid-1980s. He said one night he was anchored near an island off the coast of Venezuela. He was with his girlfriend and they had just fallen asleep when he heard a bump. At first, he didn't think much of it. Barely noticed it, but decided to check it out. He left the sleeping berth and, like in most sailboats, there are a set of steep stairs to climb to get from the cabin to the aft deck. He said he always kept a pistol holstered and hanging from the side of the stair rail. As an afterthought, he grabbed his pistol as he was climbing the stairs. Once he was about halfway out on deck, he saw a man coming over the railing with an automatic weapon. Like an assault rifle. AR-15 or something like that. He said he put 2 rounds into the guy and he fell back over the railing. He ran over and looked down. The guy had fallen into his boat, and there was another guy there also armed with an assault rifle. He said he shot that guy a couple of times, pulled up anchor, and got out of there. He said that pirate activity was not unheard of around there and people like this would board your boat, tie you up and take everything. Then they would torch the boat with you on it. The bump he had heard was the other boat coming up beside his boat. He said that was his last visit to South America. When I was about 18 I worked for a moving company. They'd hire just about anybody that could lift heavy things, so I worked with all kinds of colorful characters. This one day I was out with this really old guy who is super old school and a real alcoholic. Our first move of the day was in a homosexual area of town in Toronto, and on the drive down my colleague was making a whole bunch of gay jokes. There was nothing I could really say or do, so I just kept quiet and kept on driving. The whole move was really difficult. The apartment hallways were really narrow, the apartment was right at the end of a very long hallway, the elevator was tiny and the apartment itself had 2 stories with the windy narrow staircase connecting them. When we finally got there I knocked on the door, and when it opened the man who answered was literally bawling his eyes out. I looked at my colleague who was looking at this gay man crying very deeply, and my colleague turned to me and said I'll be in the truck and walked away and wouldn't help me with the move at all. Turns out the guy who owned the apartment was moving into palliative care because he had AIDS and was dying. I did that whole move myself and I too never forget how devastated that man was as I took all his stuff out of that house. I just wish there was something I could say to help him, but there wasn't, so I just did my job. Not terrifying, more depressing. A few years ago my dad came to me while he was a bit tipsy and tried to talk to me about my depression. Back then it was very new to us, and it was a struggle to open up about it, when out of the blue he starts sobbing. Keep in mind I had never seen my dad cry before. He tells me that him and my mom met while she was a stripper, and he was a bartender at the same club, that he always regretted where they came from. They also abused drugs before they got pregnant with me, and how he wished he could take the pain away from me and deal with it himself, because he knew how it felt. He talked about how he was so desperate to make sure our family was financially stable and happy, that he would have done anything to take the depression away. Before that, I'd only ever seen him as a slightly annoying dad and didn't bond with him much after, though. I took the time to really get to know him as more than just my dad. Now he's my best friend. In a way, him being tipsy that afternoon and opening up to me is the reason I have such a healthy relationship with him. Freshman year of college, among all the new friends I made that year, there was one guy who was always a goofball. Very laid back, casual, down for whatever. The biggest red flag we got from him was that whenever people were drinking and hanging out, he would always essentially black out. He drank way too much, and would kind of spaghetti noodle his way around the party. While also intoxicated, after the party had winded down one night, a few people, and I asked him why he always goes so damn hard. While drooping his head a ton, sloshing around, and slurring everything, he told us about how a few months ago, the summer before college started, his best friend called him. They lived in a small town by the beach, and his friend asked him to come meet him to watch the sunset by the water. He biked over there, sat down, and they talked for a while. Everything seemed fine. Then his friend took out a pistol and shot himself in the head, killing himself instantly. Apparently my friend had to call the police while covered in blood, brains, and skull fragments, just totally in shock. And then a few weeks later he went off to college a few states away, still in shock and unable to sleep or focus on anything. He didn't remember telling us that story, and I don't think any of us wanted to bring it up. His drinking habits didn't change until he was about to graduate, by which point he started going to therapy, got a job right after graduation, and seems to be doing better in the years since, thank God. They didn't tell me this while they were drunk, but I think it fits here. I am a volunteer at a nursing home. When one of the female residents was close to death, she confided it in me this. One time her husband cheated on her with the neighbor's wife. When the neighbor's husband found out, he was very upset, and was going to physically hurt her husband. They worked out a deal where the neighbor's husband would not hurt her husband if he was able to return the favor. In essence, her husband agreed to let the neighbor have her in order to save himself a righteous beating. It gets worse, she later became pregnant and told her husband for the rest of his life that it was his, but she honestly believed it to be the neighbor's. Her whole life she was carrying this burden about her son and what her husband had done to her, both with the cheating on her and with the trading her off like a cow. It was truly a heartbreaking conversation. My brother got terribly drunk 2 years ago at Thanksgiving, like 7 or 8 Sam Adams, and he was fine at first, then he started sobbing and I was the one to comfort him for more than 3 minutes. He confided in me about his suicidal thoughts and how he fought with his friends about their relationships and how happy they are and wished he could have that too. Maybe fought is the wrong word, like he felt happy that they were happy, but was sad that he wasn't happy like that too. He said he was too scared to do it, because then I would be alone. It was the turning point where I could finally get him to get on antidepressants. He also brought up something from when we were like 6. And he put gum in my hair, and we had to cut my hair off. And he was sobbing over this, calling himself a terrible brother, and that I didn't deserve him. I didn't even remember that happening, and I ended up with short hair anyways, so I don't really care. He's doing way better now and hasn't ever gotten that drunk again. Love my brother, man. I'm gonna go give him a hug. This was about 6 months ago now. My brother and I were getting drunk one night, because it was the weekend, and we just wanted to get fucked up and play video games. We had done plenty of shots and plenty of drinks, and we were the definition of fucked up. We were having fun playing some old WAW zombies for nostalgia, and we paused it to grab some chips. As I was grabbing the salsa, he said to me that he had tried committing suicide about a month prior to this. He had taken some pills and they pumped his stomach and shit, and he told me the whole time he was thinking of me and how shitty and depressed I'd be if he had died, and that he'd never want to lose me. I told him I had also tried committing suicide a while ago, and I thought the exact same thing about him. We continued playing zombies while talking about everything under the moon, and we've been talking every day since. Have never missed and will never miss a day. We're both doing a lot better now, and we're both in therapy. It's nice having someone to talk to and trust about these things. Edit. Thanks for the awards, y'all. But instead of gifting me stuff, check on your friends and family, and especially people you haven't talked to in a bit. Sometimes we are just too depressed to try initiating conversation. Showering off my blackout drunk father because he had shit himself when he started bawling and confessed to being pinned down and raped by his brother's friends. Edit. This comment took off, so I too elaborate a bit on the FAQs. I was 16 when this happened. He worked an early shift, so he was always home when I'd get home from school, and would be drunk on the average 4 days a week. He was never abusive or angry, just distant. But in that moment when he blurted it out, I could see the pain and weight he was carrying through the tears. I was obviously in total shock, so I just let him sob and talk as I listened. I finished washing him off, then got him to bed where he slept it off. He was blackout drunk, so I knew he'd never remember the conversation, so I kept it to myself. Other than my therapist, LVE never told a soul until now. He blamed himself, and there's unfortunately still a stigma surrounding men and admitting sexual assault, but it does happen to them too and needs to be addressed. My father dealt with it in an unhealthy manner for a long time. Whether or not he talked to someone to address it properly, I too never know, but he has been sober for over 20 years now and much more present in our family's life. My ex in college told me once, when he was blackout drunk, that a few years prior, him and a bunch of other kids broke into a house to have a party. The family that lived there was on vacation, or something, and were all gone. IDK how they picked the house, or knew it'd be empty, sorry. It's been like 12 years, and I forgot some details. They all got drunk and someone decided it would be fun to break a picture on the wall. Then someone else did, too. Eventually it devolved into them all destroying the house. Absolutely everything they could. All the windows were broken. Broke the legs off all the chairs and used them to beat holes into the walls. Ripped and stole clothing. Ripped or burnt all the family photos on the walls and shit. I don't remember all the stuff he said that they broke, but I remember him crying and saying that they ruined those people's lives and there's no way to make it right. I honestly think he was so fucked up that he doesn't remember telling me, because we never mentioned it again. Anyway, like 2 years later, he punched me in the face for asking for a ride to work, one too many times, so I guess he was a piece of shit regardless of current situation, or alcohol intake. I had a friend who told me that his girlfriend dumped him because they got into a huge fight when they were drunk and she was convinced he threatened her with physical violence. He said he was saying things out of frustration like and all that, but he was sitting the whole time and she was the one that was yelling and screaming. Weird, but okay. A few weeks later, I meet him up for drinks and he is absolutely plastered. I walk him back to his place with one of his friends. As we are walking he starts crying and says that he fucked up and that he is a terrible person. We asked him to elaborate and he tells us that his ex left because he threw her into a mirror and then flipped a coffee table at her. She's okay. Couple bruises, scrapes. Kept my distance after that. I was sitting at home when a friend of mine came over shit-faced. She staggered in and sat down on the couch a few feet from me. She told me something completely fucked up. When I was 17, my stepdad was drunk and tried to have sex with me because I looked like his dead wife. He kept calling me Abigail, and just wouldn't let go of me. He kept saying he missed her, and that he loves her, but knew she'd never come back. He said I reminded him of her to the point he couldn't help himself. That's why I never talk about sex stuff with you guys. I lost my virginity out of pity, and it left me with so much mental and emotional damage. She started crying after that, but I had no idea what to do or say. I was stunned. Then it hit me how she doesn't talk about her stepdad when asked about her family. She said I'm the only one that knows about any of this. My brother confessed he was in love with and raping his stepdaughter. It wasn't rape because they loved each other. Yeah, no, you are a rapist. I tracked her down because she had run away at 16 and told her to tell the police that I would stand by her side. My brother is serving a 7-year prison sentence. It turns out he also raped his daughter's friend. This was fucking hard. My dad is schizophrenic, and my brother raised me while my mom worked her ass off. I was pregnant when he finally went to court. My baby had IUGR, and I had to be induced, and it triggered a terrible postpartum mental break. I hate his guts. I can't imagine how my niece is doing, as just being in proximity to this fucked up my life. Like my brain will never be the same. At a Christmas party all was going well until a middle-aged couple started having an intoxicated blazing row. This domestic occurred a few minutes short of midnight. The wife involved was not a co-worker, but her husband was. They were both very drunk. People intervened, with me escorting the husband into the cloakroom to cool off. Now I knew that this guy had a reputation as a cheating Tinder hustler, and that he'd often brag about his extramarital conquests. I wasn't ready for him to confess that he had hepatitis and had tested HIV positive 6 months ago. But confess he did, sobbing that his wife was going to leave him, as if he was the victim. TLDR, drunk married sleazebag confessed to sexual relations with multiple Tinder dates knowing he had hepatitis and HIV. I was at a bar with a kitchen co-worker. He'd apparently been stabbed in some kind of altercation some years ago. Never asked him specifically what it was about, but he struck me as kind of a hippie-ish type dude, into fish and widespread panic and such, seemed like a mild-mannered stoner, so I assumed it had just been some guys messing with him and it escalated further, though I didn't know for sure. This night at the bar, a few shots in, he told me that after the stabbing, while he was in the hospital, his older sister had found the attackers and that they weren't alive anymore, or something to that effect, went on about how dangerous his sister was and how she was connected to some scary people. The guy actually died a few months ago, out of the blue, from what was said to be a stroke. He was only 38 at the time of his death. He'd been gone from the restaurant we worked at for some time, got let go for drinking on the job. I assume it was just a random thing, or maybe he had undisclosed health issues, but still odd. He was an interesting guy. Not 100% sure if the man was drunk, or just needing to get it off his chest. Years ago I waited tables in a family Italian restaurant. A family of 12 came in, had wine, appetizers, dinner and dessert. After the dinner the eldest man at the table pulled me aside and asked to pay. We walked over to the register. He says thank you, the service and food were great. Ends up tipping around 40%, was blown away, said thank you probably 20 times. Anyway, he waited till no one else was around. He leans close and says, I was special forces in Vietnam, I had over 300 confirmed kills. In one instance I had 50 kills in one mission holding off enemy forces. We did some really sadistic shit over there. I've never told anyone about this. Was just so stunned by the randomness, and frankly causal way he said it. I couldn't even think of anything to say, so I blurted out a forced thank you for your service, with an awkward shoulder pat. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one.